Do you remember your grandmother's holiday parties when the coffee table held tiny foods on silver trays, each one carefully arranged? She spent all afternoon making appetizers that disappeared in minutes, while guests stood in the living room holding cocktail napkins.
Mostly, to be honest, because of intelligent marketing, rather than any great show of speed right now.
Between 1950 and 1959, 50 appetizers filled Betty Crocker cookbooks and holiday tables. By 1965, hostesses made 20. Today, approximately, they vanished from over tables. Before we bring them back, share this with the one person you'd love to stand beside in the kitchen, tasting these forgotten 1950s Betty Crocker holiday appetizers together. Walk into any 1950s kitchen before a holiday party, and you'd find hostesses making deviled ham pinwheels, white bread spread with deviled ham, rolled tight, chilled, and sliced into spirals. This economical appetizer cost about 40 cents and produced 4 dozen pinwheels that looked impressive despite simple preparation. Hostesses made deviled ham pinwheels by removing crusts from white bread, rolling each slice flat with a rolling pin, spreading canned deviled ham thin across the flattened bread, rolling the bread tightly like a jelly roll, wrapping the rolls in waxed paper, and refrigerating for at least 2 hours. The chilled rolls were sliced into half-inch rounds, creating spirals of pink ham surrounded by white bread. The bread had to be fresh and soft. Stale bread cracked when rolled. The rolling pin flattened the bread just enough to make it pliable without tearing it. The deviled ham spread had to be thin and even. Too much filling made the rolls too thick to slice neatly, while uneven spreading created lopsided spirals. Cheese straws brought Southern tradition to holiday parties through thin, crispy cheese pastry twisted into straw shapes. This elegant appetizer cost about 50 cents and produced 6 dozen straws that were delicate and impressive. Hostesses made cheese straws by mixing grated sharp cheddar cheese with flour, butter, and cayenne pepper to create dough, rolling it thin, cutting it into strips, twisting each strip into a spiral, and baking until golden and crispy. The twisting created the characteristic shape that gave cheese straws their name. The dough had to be kept cold while working with it, or it became too soft to twist properly. The strips had to be cut uniformly so they baked evenly. Stuffed celery brought crunch to appetizer trays through celery stalks filled with cream cheese or pimento cheese. This simple appetizer cost about 30 cents and created finger food that was fresh and crisp, providing contrast to rich, heavy appetizers. Hostesses made stuffed celery by washing and trimming celery stalks, cutting them into 3-inch pieces, and filling the hollow with cream cheese that had been softened and mixed with seasonings. The cream cheese could be plain or mixed with olives, pimentos, nuts, or herbs, creating variations that kept the basic concept interesting. The celery had to be very fresh and crisp. Limp celery was unappetizing and announced that the hostess had prepared too far in advance. The filling had to be piped or spread neatly into the celery groove, creating smooth, professional appearance. Rumaki brought exotic flavors to holiday parties through chicken livers and water chestnuts wrapped in bacon and broiled. This sophisticated appetizer cost about 60 cents and demonstrated that hostesses could create restaurant-quality food at home. Hostesses made rumaki by cutting chicken livers into pieces, wrapping each piece with a water chestnut slice in a half strip of bacon, securing with toothpicks, marinating in soy sauce mixture, then broiling until the bacon was crispy. The water chestnuts provided crunch that contrasted with the soft liver. The bacon had to be partially cooked before wrapping or it wouldn't crisp properly during broiling. The liver had to be fresh, Old liver had strong, unpleasant flavor that even bacon couldn't mask. Rumaki appeared at sophisticated parties where hostesses wanted to demonstrate culinary adventurousness and where guests were willing to try organ meat. Pigs in Blankets brought kid-friendly option to holiday parties through cocktail sausages wrapped in pastry dough. This crowd-pleasing appetizer cost about 50 cents and produced 4 dozen small bites that children and adults both enjoyed. Hostesses made pigs in blankets by wrapping small cocktail sausages or cut up hot dogs in strips of crescent roll dough or pie crust, baking until the pastry was golden and the sausages were heated through. The pastry created flaky wrapping that complemented the savory sausage. The dough had to be rolled thin enough to cook through, but thick enough to contain the sausage without tearing. The wrapping technique required practice. Too loose and the dough didn't adhere, too tight and it cracked during baking. Pigs in blankets appeared at family holiday parties where children were present and where having familiar, non-threatening appetizers mattered. The simple flavors and handheld format made them accessible to even picky eaters, demonstrating that successful entertaining meant including options for all ages. 5 appetizers down, 45 ahead, bread rolled around the ham, cheese twisted into delicate straws, celery filled with cream cheese, chicken livers wrapped in bacon, sausages tucked in pastry. These hostesses understood that appetizers weren't just food. They were conversation starters, status signals, proof that parties required advanced preparation. 45 more appetizers complete the entertaining repertoire. Shrimp Cocktail brought seafood elegance to holiday parties through chilled shrimp served with tangy cocktail sauce. This expensive appetizer cost about $2 and announced that the hostess was willing to splurge on premium ingredients for special occasions. Hostesses made shrimp cocktail by boiling shrimp with lemon and bay leaves until pink and cooked through, chilling them completely, then arranging them around small glasses filled with cocktail sauce made from ketchup, horseradish, lemon juice, and Worcestershire sauce. The shrimp were draped over the rim of the glasses, creating elegant presentation. The shrimp had to be properly deveined and cleaned. Any grit or dark vein announced careless preparation. The chilling was essential. Warm shrimp with cocktail sauce was unappetizing and showed poor planning. Cheeseball brought centerpiece to appetizer tables through cream cheese mixed with cheddar and seasonings, rolled in chopped nuts. This classic creation cost about 60 cents and created focal point that announced the hostess had made proper effort. Hostesses made cheese ball by mixing softened cream cheese with shredded sharp cheddar, Worcestershire sauce, garlic powder, and sometimes dried beef or green onions, forming the mixture into a ball and rolling it in chopped pecans or walnuts. The ball was refrigerated until firm, then served with crackers. The cheese mixture had to be thoroughly combined and properly chilled. Soft cheese ball was messy and couldn't hold its shape. The nut coating had to be pressed firmly into the surface so it didn't fall off when guests cut into the ball. Cheese ball appeared at every 1950s holiday party because it was economical, impressive-looking, and reliably crowd-pleasing. The ball became so standard that not having one announced either poverty or lack of entertaining knowledge. Olive pinwheels brought briny flavor to appetizer trays through cream cheese and olive mixture spread on bread, rolled, and sliced. This savory creation cost about 45 cents and produced 4 dozen pinwheels that were more sophisticated than plain deviled ham versions. Hostesses made olive pinwheels by mixing softened cream cheese with chopped green olives and pimentos, spreading the mixture on crustless white bread that had been rolled flat, rolling tightly, chilling, and slicing into rounds. The olive pieces created green flecks throughout the cream cheese that made the pinwheels visually interesting. Bacon-wrapped dates brought sweet-salty combination to holiday parties through dates wrapped in bacon and broiled until crispy. This simple appetizer cost about 50 cents and created flavor combination that was ahead of its time, predating the bacon-on-everything trend by decades. Hostesses made bacon-wrapped dates by wrapping pitted dates in half strips of bacon, securing with toothpicks, and broiling until the bacon was crispy and the dates were heated through and slightly caramelized. The bacon fat rendered during cooking, creating rich, smoky flavor that complemented the date's intense sweetness. The bacon had to be thin cut, or it wouldn't cook through before the dates burned. The broiling required watching carefully because the sugar in the dates could burn quickly. Bacon-wrapped dates appeared at sophisticated parties where sweet-savory combinations were appreciated and where the hostess was willing to try flavor pairings that seemed unusual. Cheese puffs brought hot appetizers to parties through cream puff pastry filled with cheese. This impressive creation cost about 70 cents and demonstrated advanced baking skills that separated accomplished hostesses from beginners. Hostesses made cheese puffs by preparing pate choux, the same pastry used for cream puffs, mixing grated cheese into the dough, piping small mounds onto baking sheets, and baking until puffed and golden. The pastry puffed dramatically during baking, creating hollow centers that were light and airy. Swedish meatballs brought Scandinavian tradition to holiday parties through tiny meatballs in cream sauce, served in chafing dishes. This crowd-pleasing appetizer cost about 85 cents and kept warm throughout the party, requiring no last-minute preparation once the party started. Hostesses made Swedish meatballs by mixing ground beef with breadcrumbs, eggs, onions, and spices, including allspice and nutmeg, forming the mixture into marble-sized meatballs, browning them, then simmering in cream sauce made from beef broth, cream, and flour. The sauce had to be thick enough to coat the meatballs without being gluey. The meatballs had to be small and uniform. Large meatballs were too substantial for appetizers, while varied sizes cooked unevenly. Aspic molds brought gelatin artistry to appetizer tables through savory gelatin containing vegetables, meat, or seafood. This impressive creation cost about 60 cents and demonstrated that hostesses could create showpiece appetizers that looked professional. Hostesses made aspic by dissolving unflavored gelatin in tomato juice or beef broth, adding vegetables like peas, carrots, or celery, sometimes adding diced ham or shrimp, pouring into decorative molds, and refrigerating until firm. The unmolding revealed shaped gelatin that looked elegant and sophisticated. The gelatin had to set completely before unmolding, or it collapsed and created mess. Liver pâté brought French sophistication to American parties through chicken livers, blended smooth with butter and brandy. This elegant appetizer cost about 70 cents and announced that the hostess understood continental cuisine and could create restaurant-quality food. Hostesses made liver pâté by sautéing chicken livers with onions until cooked through, blending them smooth with softened butter, brandy, and seasonings, then packing the mixture into a decorative mold or crock and refrigerating until firm. The smooth texture required thorough blending. Any lumps announced amateur technique. Cocktail wieners in barbecue sauce brought easy hot appetizer to parties through small sausages simmered in sweet tangy sauce. This crowd-pleasing creation cost about 60 cents and could be kept warm in a chafing dish throughout the party. Hostesses made cocktail wieners by simmering small smoked sausages in barbecue sauce made from ketchup, brown sugar, vinegar, and Worcestershire sauce. The sauce had to be thick enough to coat the wieners without being gluey, requiring proper simmering to reduce and thicken. The wieners were served with toothpicks for spearing, creating handheld appetizer that required no plates or utensils. Water chestnut wraps brought Asian-inspired flavors to parties through water chestnuts wrapped in bacon and marinated in soy sauce. This crunchy appetizer cost about 70 cents and created textural contrast that made them memorable and distinctive. Hostesses made water chestnut wraps by draining canned water chestnuts, marinating them in mixture of soy sauce and brown sugar, wrapping each chestnut in a half strip of bacon, securing with toothpicks, and broiling until the bacon was crispy. The water chestnuts provided crunch that contrasted with the chewy bacon. The bacon had to be thin cut, or it wouldn't cook through properly. The broiling required watching carefully, because the sugar in the marinade could burn quickly, creating bitter flavor instead of pleasant caramelization. Water chestnut wraps appeared at parties where the hostess wanted to demonstrate awareness of Asian flavors and where guests were adventurous enough to try unfamiliar ingredients. The exotic water chestnuts announced sophistication and culinary worldliness. 15 appetizers down, 35 ahead, bread spiraling around ham, cheese twisting into delicate straws, celery becoming edible vessels, tiny meatballs swimming in cream, gelatin shaped into art, organ meat transformed into French elegance. Every appetizer announced something: your budget, your sophistication, your willingness to spend hours preparing food that vanished in minutes. 35 more appetizers complete the party. Cream cheese and olive spread brought simple elegance to crackers through cream cheese mixed with chopped olives and spread on crackers or used as dip. This economical appetizer cost about 40 cents and created spread that was more interesting than plain cream cheese. Hostesses made cream cheese and olive spread by mixing softened cream cheese with chopped green olives, pimentos, and sometimes a little olive juice for extra flavor. The mixture was spread on crackers or served in a bowl with crackers for dipping. The olives had to be chopped fine enough to distribute evenly, but not so fine they disappeared. The cream cheese had to be properly softened. Cold cream cheese wouldn't mix smoothly and created lumpy spread that looked unprofessional. Cream cheese and olive spread appeared at casual parties where simple, reliable appetizers were needed and where the hostess wanted something that could be made ahead without last-minute work. Deviled eggs brought protein to appetizer tables through hard-boiled eggs filled with yolk mixture. This classic creation cost about 30 cents and produced 24 egg halves that were economical and universally appealing. Hostesses made deviled eggs by hard-boiling eggs, peeling them carefully, cutting them in half lengthwise, removing the yolks, mixing the yolks with mayonnaise, mustard, and seasonings, then piping or spooning the mixture back into the egg white halves. The filling was garnished with paprika, creating the characteristic red dusting that announced proper deviled eggs. The eggs had to be perfectly cooked. Overcooked eggs had greenish yolks and sulphurous smell, while undercooked eggs were difficult to peel. The yolk mixture had to be smooth. Lumpy filling announced careless preparation. Deviled eggs appeared at every holiday gathering because they were economical, easy to prepare, and reliably popular. The eggs represented democratic appetizer that appeared at both fancy and casual parties, demonstrating their universal appeal. Ham salad spread brought leftover ham to parties through ground ham mixed with mayonnaise and pickles. This economical appetizer cost almost nothing when using leftover ham and created spread that was flavorful and substantial. Hostesses made ham salad spread by grinding leftover ham fine, mixing it with mayonnaise, chopped pickles, and sometimes mustard or pickle juice, creating spread that was smooth enough to spread on crackers, but chunky enough to have texture. The pickles added crunch and tang that balanced the ham's richness. The ham had to be ground fine. Large pieces created spread that was difficult to eat on crackers. The mayonnaise amount had to be calibrated carefully. Too much made the spread loose and messy, while too little made it dry and difficult to spread. Cheese fondue brought Swiss tradition to American parties through melted cheese served in a communal pot with bread cubes for dipping. This interactive appetizer cost about $1 and created social experience where guests gathered around the fondue pot. Hostesses made cheese fondue by melting Swiss cheese with white wine, garlic, and a little cornstarch to prevent separation, keeping the mixture warm over a small burner. Bread cubes were speared on fondue forks and dipped into the hot cheese. The cheese had to be melted slowly and stirred constantly to prevent scorching or becoming grainy. The wine's acidity helped keep the cheese smooth and prevented it from becoming stringy. Cheese fondue appeared at cocktail parties and casual gatherings where interactive eating was part of the entertainment. Salmon mousse brought elegant seafood to parties through canned salmon mixed with gelatin and whipped cream, molded into impressive shapes. This sophisticated appetizer cost about 60 cents and demonstrated that hostesses could create restaurant-quality presentations at home. Hostesses made salmon mousse by mixing flaked canned salmon with mayonnaise, lemon juice, and dissolved gelatin, folding in whipped cream, pouring into a decorative mold, and refrigerating until firm. The mousse was unmolded onto a serving plate and garnished with cucumber slices and fresh dill. The gelatin had to be at the right consistency when folding in the whipped cream. Too liquid and the cream deflated, too set and lumps formed. 20 appetizers down, 30 remaining. Eggs filled and dusted with paprika, ham ground into spread, cheese melting in communal pot, salmon shaped into elegant mousse, water chestnuts providing unexpected crunch. You're witnessing complete entertaining system, hot and cold, simple and complex, economical and expensive, American and international. 30 more appetizers reveal the full repertoire. Stuffed mushroom caps brought elegant finger food to parties through mushrooms filled with breadcrumb mixture and baked. This sophisticated appetizer cost about 60 cents and created bite-sized morsels that were impressive and flavorful. Hostesses made stuffed mushrooms by removing stems from large mushroom caps, chopping the stems fine, sautéing them with onions and garlic, mixing with breadcrumbs, cheese, and herbs, filling the caps with the mixture and baking until the mushrooms were tender and the filling was golden. The mushroom caps served as edible containers. The mushrooms had to be large enough to hold filling but small enough to be eaten in 1 or 2 bites. The size selection demonstrated understanding of what made good finger food versus what required plates and forks. Stuffed mushrooms appeared at formal holiday parties where elegant, sophisticated appetizers were expected. Cheese wafers brought crispy, cheesy crackers to parties through homemade wafers that were more flavorful than store-bought crackers. This economical appetizer cost about 40 cents and produced 8 dozen wafers that could be made weeks ahead and stored. Hostesses made cheese wafers by mixing grated sharp cheddar with butter, flour, and cayenne pepper, forming the dough into logs, chilling until firm, slicing thin, and baking until crispy. Pickled shrimp brought tangy seafood to parties through shrimp marinated in vinegar, oil, and spices. This make-ahead appetizer cost about $1.50 and created shrimp that improved with age as flavors developed. Hostesses made pickled shrimp by boiling shrimp until pink, cooling them, then marinating in mixture of vinegar, oil, sliced onions, bay leaves, and pickling spices for at least 24 hours. The marinating transformed plain shrimp into tangy, flavorful appetizer. The shrimp had to be properly deveined, and the marinade had to penetrate completely. requiring at least a day of refrigeration. The long marinating time meant pickled shrimp had to be planned well in advance. Pickled shrimp appeared at formal parties where make-ahead appetizers were valued and where seafood was appreciated. The tangy flavor provided contrast to rich chicken liver pate on crackers brought organ meat to parties through smooth pate spread on crackers and garnished. This economical appetizer cost about 50 cents and created sophisticated bites that seemed expensive despite using inexpensive chicken livers. Hostesses made chicken liver pate by sautéing chicken livers with onions and garlic, blending them smooth with butter and brandy or sherry, seasoning with salt, pepper, and herbs, then spreading on crackers and garnishing with capers or cornichons. The smooth texture required thorough blending. The livers had to be fresh and properly trimmed. Any green bile spots had to be removed, or they created bitter flavor. The pate had to be well seasoned. Under-seasoned liver tasted flat and unappetizing. Chicken liver pate appeared at sophisticated parties where organ meat was accepted and appreciated, where French-influenced appetizers announced culinary knowledge. The pate demonstrated that economical ingredients could create elegant results through proper technique. Miniature quiches brought French elegance to parties through tiny pastry shells filled with egg custard and various fillings. This labor-intensive appetizer cost about $1 and produced 4 dozen quiches that were impressive and sophisticated. Hostesses made miniature quiches by pressing pastry dough into small muffin tins, filling with mixture of eggs, cream, cheese, and additions like bacon, mushrooms, or spinach. Then baking until the custard set and the pastry was golden. Each quiche was individual serving that could be eaten in 2 bites. The pastry had to be thin enough to cook through but thick enough to hold the filling without leaking. Blue cheese dressing dip brought bold flavor to vegetable platters through blue cheese mixed with sour cream and mayonnaise. This pungent creation cost about 60 cents and created dip that was more interesting than plain ranch or French dressing. Hostesses made blue cheese dip by crumbling blue cheese and mixing it with sour cream, mayonnaise, lemon juice, and sometimes garlic powder, creating thick dip that clung to vegetables. The blue cheese had to be quality cheese. Cheap blue cheese tasted harsh and chemical. The dip improved after sitting overnight as flavors melded, making it ideal make-ahead appetizer. The strong flavor meant people either loved it or avoided it, creating the same polarizing reactions that many organ meat appetizers generated. Blue cheese dip appeared at parties where bold flavors were appreciated and where the hostess wasn't afraid to serve polarizing foods. The dip demonstrated confidence and understanding that not every appetizer had to appeal to everyone. Ham and cheese rolls brought simple elegance to parties through ham slices rolled around cheese sticks. This easy appetizer cost about 70 cents and created finger food that required no cooking and minimal preparation. Hostesses made ham and cheese rolls by cutting cheese into sticks, wrapping each stick in a slice of ham, securing with toothpicks, and arranging on serving plates. The rolls could be made hours ahead and refrigerated until serving time. The ham had to be sliced thin enough to roll easily, but thick enough to have presence and flavor. The cheese had to be firm enough to cut into sticks that held their shape. Soft cheese was too difficult to handle. Ham and cheese rolls appeared at casual parties where simple, reliable appetizers were needed and where the hostess wanted something that could be prepared entirely in advance. The simplicity made them accessible to even inexperienced entertainers. Anchovy canapes brought bold, salty flavor to parties through anchovies on buttered toast rounds. This polarizing appetizer cost about 50 cents and created strong reactions. People either loved anchovies passionately or refused to go near them. Hostesses made anchovy canapes by cutting bread into small rounds using a biscuit cutter, toasting the rounds, spreading them with butter, topping each with an anchovy fillet, and garnishing with capers or a small piece of hard-boiled egg. The presentation had to be neat and attractive. The anchovies had to be drained well. Oil-soaked canapes were greasy and unappetizing. The toast rounds had to be crispy enough to hold the topping without becoming soggy. Stuffed cherry tomatoes brought fresh vegetables to parties through tiny tomatoes hollowed and filled with various mixtures. This colorful appetizer cost about 40 cents and created bite-sized vegetables that were more interesting than plain raw vegetables. Hostesses made stuffed cherry tomatoes by cutting the tops off cherry tomatoes, scooping out the seeds and pulp, draining the shells upside down, then filling them with mixtures like tuna salad, egg salad, or herbed cream cheese. The tomatoes provided edible containers that were fresh and appealing. The tomatoes had to be drained thoroughly, or the filling became watery, and the tomatoes leaked on the serving plate. The filling had to be thick enough to stay in the tomatoes without falling out when picked up. Stuffed cherry tomatoes appeared at summer and fall parties when fresh tomatoes were available, creating seasonal appetizer that connected party food to garden produce. Cheese fondue meatballs combined two popular appetizers, meatballs and cheese fondue, into one dish where meatballs were served in cheese sauce for dipping. This creative combination cost about $1 and demonstrated how hostesses could innovate by combining familiar elements. Hostesses made cheese fondue meatballs by preparing small meatballs, browning them, then serving them in melted cheese sauce made from Swiss cheese, wine, and garlic. The cheese sauce was kept warm in a chafing dish, and guests speared meatballs with toothpicks and dipped them in the cheese. The meatballs had to be small enough to be coated completely by cheese, but large enough to be satisfying. The cheese sauce required constant stirring to prevent scorching and separation. Cheese fondue meatballs appeared at parties where the hostess wanted to create something unique and memorable, where combining familiar elements in new ways demonstrated creativity and entertaining skill. 30 appetizers down, 20 remaining. Blue cheese dividing guests. Ham rolling around cheese, anchovies announcing boldness, cherry tomatoes becoming vessels, meatballs swimming in fondue. These hostesses were innovators combining familiar elements, adapting restaurant dishes, bringing international flavors home, proving that entertaining meant creativity, not just following recipes. 20 final appetizers reveal the peak of 1950s party culture. Prosciutto-wrapped melon brought Italian sophistication to parties through cantaloupe or honeydew wrapped in thin-sliced prosciutto. This elegant appetizer cost about $1 and created sweet-salty combination that was refined and unusual. Hostesses made prosciutto-wrapped melon by cutting melon into bite-sized pieces, wrapping each piece in a thin slice of prosciutto, securing with toothpicks. The melon had to be ripe but firm. Overripe melon was too soft and fell apart, while underripe melon lacked sweetness. The prosciutto had to be sliced paper-thin. Thick prosciutto was too chewy and overpowered the delicate melon. The combination created flavor balance that was sophisticated and appealing to adventurous eaters. Crab dip brought seafood to parties through canned crab meat mixed with cream cheese and seasonings. This creamy appetizer cost about $1 and created dip that seemed expensive and special despite using canned crab. Hostesses made crab dip by mixing flaked canned crab meat with softened cream cheese, mayonnaise, lemon juice, Worcestershire sauce, and seasonings, creating thick dip that was served with crackers or vegetables. The crab meat had to be picked through carefully to remove any shell pieces. The dip could be served cold or baked until bubbly and golden on top, creating two different presentations from the same basic recipe. Bologna cornucopias brought whimsy to parties through Bologna, slices rolled into cone shapes and filled with cream cheese. This playful appetizer cost about 35 cents and created finger food that children particularly enjoyed. Hostesses made Bologna cornucopias by rolling Bologna slices into cone shapes, securing with toothpicks, filling the cones with cream cheese piped through a pastry bag, and garnishing with olive slices or pimento. The cream cheese filling showed at the top of each cone, creating visual interest. The Bologna had to be fresh and pliable. Clam dip brought seafood to parties through canned minced clams mixed with cream cheese and seasonings. This easy appetizer cost about 50 cents and created dip that was more sophisticated than onion dip, but just as simple to prepare. Hostesses made clam dip by mixing drained canned minced clams with softened cream cheese, sour cream, lemon juice, Worcestershire sauce, and garlic powder, creating thick dip that was served with potato chips or crackers. The clams had to be drained thoroughly. Excess liquid made the dip too thin. The dip improved after sitting for several hours as flavors melded, making it ideal make-ahead appetizer. Stuffed eggs with caviar elevated deviled eggs through caviar garnish that transformed simple eggs into luxury appetizer. This expensive creation cost about $2 and announced that the hostess was willing to splurge on premium ingredients. Hostesses made stuffed eggs with caviar by preparing deviled eggs, piping the yolk mixture back into the whites, then topping each egg with a small spoonful of black or red caviar. The caviar had to be real fish roe. Imitation caviar announced shortcuts and disappointed sophisticated guests. The eggs had to be perfectly prepared. Any imperfection in the base deviled egg was magnified by the expensive caviar topping. The presentation had to be flawless, because the caviar announced that these were special eggs worthy of careful attention. Stuffed eggs with caviar appeared at the most formal cocktail parties where expense wasn't a concern and where demonstrating luxury and sophistication mattered. The caviar announced that this party was special occasion worthy of premium ingredients. 35 appetizers down, 15 remaining. Mushroom caps filled individually. Cheese baked into crispy wafers, clams transforming into dip, Bologna shaped into playful cones, caviar crowning deviled eggs. You're seeing the complete range, from economical Bologna to expensive caviar, from playful to formal, from simple to complex. 15 final appetizers complete the party. Spinach dip in bread bowl brought dramatic presentation to parties through dip served in hollowed bread that became edible container. This impressive creation cost about 70 cents and created centerpiece that looked professional despite simple preparation. Hostesses made spinach dip by mixing thawed frozen spinach, squeezed completely dry, with sour cream, mayonnaise, dried vegetable soup mix, and water chestnuts, refrigerating overnight to let flavors develop. The dip was served in a round bread loaf that had been hollowed out, with the removed bread cut into cubes for dipping. The spinach had to be squeezed absolutely dry. Any moisture made the dip watery and thin. Salmon spread brought economical seafood to parties through canned salmon mixed with cream cheese and lemon. This simple spread cost about 50 cents and created appetizer that seemed more expensive than it was. Hostesses made salmon spread by mixing flaked canned salmon with softened cream cheese, lemon juice, dill, and sometimes grated onion, creating smooth spread that was served with crackers. The salmon had to be drained well and bones removed, though some hostesses left the soft bones in for calcium. The spread could be formed into a ball and rolled in chopped parsley or nuts, creating more impressive presentation than just serving in a bowl. The shaping demonstrated extra effort and attention to presentation. Cocktail Franks brought simple hot appetizer to parties through small hot dogs simmered in sweet, tangy sauce. This easy creation cost about 50 cents and created appetizer that required minimal preparation, but that stayed warm throughout the party. Hostesses made Cocktail Franks by cutting regular hot dogs into thirds or using small cocktail sausages, simmering them in sauce made from grape jelly and prepared mustard, an unusual combination that created sweet tangy flavor. The sauce had to simmer long enough to thicken slightly and coat the franks. The grape jelly and mustard combination seemed strange, but tasted surprisingly good, creating sauce that was sweet, tangy, and slightly spicy. The unexpected ingredient combination demonstrated 1950s willingness to experiment with unusual pairings. Cheese and pineapple skewers brought sweet-savory combination to parties through cheese cubes and pineapple chunks on toothpicks. This simple appetizer cost about 40 cents and created colorful, easy finger food. Hostesses made cheese and pineapple skewers by cutting cheddar cheese into cubes, draining canned pineapple chunks, threading one piece of each onto toothpicks. The combination was simple, but the sweet, salty pairing was appealing and refreshing. The cheese had to be firm enough to cube cleanly. Soft cheese was too difficult to cut into neat cubes. Hot crab rangoon brought Chinese-American fusion to parties through wonton wrappers filled with crab and cream cheese mixture, fried until crispy. This trendy appetizer cost about $1 and demonstrated that hostesses were aware of Asian-influenced cuisine. Hostesses made crab rangoon by mixing flaked crab meat with softened cream cheese, green onions, and seasonings, placing spoonfuls of filling on wonton wrappers, folding the wrappers into triangles or bundles, and deep frying until golden and crispy. The wrappers created crispy shell around creamy filling. The wrappers had to be sealed properly with water or beaten egg, or they opened during frying and the filling leaked out. The frying had to be at the right temperature. Too cool, and the wrappers absorbed oil. Too hot, and they burned before the filling heated through. Crab rangoon appeared at parties where Asian-inspired food was fashionable and where the hostess wanted to demonstrate awareness of culinary trends beyond traditional American appetizers. 40 appetizers down, 10 remaining. Spinach hiding in bread bowls, salmon shaped and rolled in herbs, hot dogs meeting grape jelly, pineapple pairing with cheese, wontons wrapping crab. You've witnessed complete evolution, from traditional American to international fusion, from formal to casual, from expensive to economical. 10 final appetizers reveal the peak of 1950s entertaining. Stuffed prunes brought dried fruit to parties through prunes filled with cream cheese or nuts. This elegant appetizer cost about 40 cents and created sweet finger food that was different from savory options. Hostesses made stuffed prunes by pitting large dried prunes, filling them with softened cream cheese mixed with orange zest, or with whole almonds or walnut halves. The prunes were sometimes wrapped in bacon before baking, creating sweet salty combination. The prunes had to be large and moist. Small or dried-out prunes were difficult to fill and unpleasant to eat. The cream cheese filling had to be firm enough to hold its shape inside the prune. Chicken salad in pastry shells brought elegant presentation to parties through chicken salad served in individual baked pastry cups. This impressive appetizer cost about 90 cents and created individual servings that looked professional and refined. Hostesses made chicken salad pastry shells by pressing pastry dough into small muffin tins, baking until golden, cooling, then filling with chicken salad made from diced cooked chicken, mayonnaise, celery, and seasonings. The pastry shells provided crispy, edible containers. The pastry had to be thin enough to be delicate, but thick enough to hold the filling without breaking. The chicken salad had to be well seasoned and not too wet. Watery chicken salad made the pastry shells soggy. Pickled onions brought tangy vegetables to parties through small onions preserved in sweet-sour brine. This make-ahead appetizer cost about 30 cents and provided crunchy, flavorful bites that cleansed the palate between richer appetizers. Hostesses made pickled onions by peeling pearl onions, packing them in jars with brine made from vinegar, sugar, and pickling spices, processing in boiling water bath, then refrigerating for at least a week before serving. The onions improved with age as flavors developed. The onion peeling was tedious. Each tiny onion had to be peeled individually, creating labor that demonstrated dedication to entertaining. The long marinating time meant pickled onions had to be planned weeks in advance. Cheese soufflé bites brought French technique to parties through miniature soufflés baked in small molds. This impressive appetizer cost about 70 cents and demonstrated advanced baking skills that separated accomplished hostesses from beginners. Hostesses made cheese soufflé bites by preparing soufflé base from butter, flour, milk, and egg yolks, folding in stiffly beaten egg whites and grated cheese, spooning into small buttered molds, and baking until puffed and golden. The soufflés had to be served immediately. They deflated as they cooled. The egg whites had to be beaten to proper stiffness and folded in carefully, or the soufflés wouldn't rise. The timing of when to serve was critical. Soufflés waited for no one. Cheese soufflé bites appeared at sophisticated parties where French cooking techniques were appreciated and where the hostess was confident enough to serve appetizers that required precise timing and immediate service. Toast points with pate brought simple elegance to parties through small triangles of toast topped with liver, pate, and garnish. This sophisticated appetizer cost about 60 cents and created refined bites that announced French-influenced entertaining. Hostesses made toast points by cutting bread slices diagonally into quarters, toasting them until golden and crispy, spreading each triangle with liver pate, and garnishing with cornichons or capers. The toast had to be crispy enough to hold the pate without becoming soggy. The pate could be homemade or purchased. Store-bought pate saved time, while homemade announced greater dedication to entertaining excellence. 45 appetizers down, 5 remaining. You've witnessed complete party system, hot and cold, sweet and savory, simple and complex. American and international, economical and expensive. These hostesses were curators assembling variety that ensured every guest found something appealing, that conversation flowed, that parties succeeded. 5 final appetizers reveal the peak of 1950s entertaining culture. This is the appetizer that shows the peak of 1950s entertaining ambition. Mushroom caps requiring individual attention and 3 different cheeses creating complex flavor that announced the hostess had invested serious time and effort in party preparation. Stuffed mushroom caps with 3 cheeses brought gourmet sophistication to holiday parties through mushrooms filled with mixture of cream cheese, blue cheese, and Parmesan, creating flavor combination that was rich, complex, and memorable. This labor-intensive creation cost about $1 and produced about 30 stuffed caps that were impressive and elegant. Hostesses made 3 cheese stuffed mushrooms by removing stems from large mushroom caps, chopping the stems fine, sautéing them with onions and garlic and butter, mixing the sautéed stems with softened cream cheese, crumbled blue cheese, and grated Parmesan, adding breadcrumbs and herbs, filling each mushroom cap with the mixture, topping with additional Parmesan, and baking until the mushrooms were tender and the filling was golden and bubbly. The 3 cheeses created complexity that single cheese versions lacked. The cream cheese provided creamy base, the blue cheese added pungent depth, and the Parmesan contributed salty, nutty notes that tied everything together. This layering of flavors demonstrated sophisticated understanding of how ingredients worked together to create results greater than any single component. The mushroom caps had to be uniform in size so they cooked evenly and looked professional when arranged on serving platters. This is the appetizer the hook promised would show what entertaining excellence meant. Cream puff pastry filled with crab salad, requiring both pastry-making skills and seafood preparation, demonstrating mastery of multiple techniques in single appetizer. Cheese puffs with crab brought French pastry technique to American parties through pate filled with crab salad. This sophisticated creation cost about $1.50 and produced about 3 dozen puffs that were impressive and elegant, announcing that the hostess possessed advanced baking skills. Hostesses made cheese puffs with crab by preparing pate à choux pastry, the same pastry used for cream puffs and eclairs, mixing grated cheese into the dough, piping small mounds onto baking sheets, baking until puffed and golden, cooling completely, slicing the puffs in half and filling them with crab salad made from canned or fresh crab meat mixed with mayonnaise, lemon juice, and seasonings. The pastry required proper technique. The eggs had to be beaten in one at a time until the dough reached the right consistency. Bacon-wrapped scallops brought expensive seafood to holiday parties through sea scallops wrapped in bacon and broiled until the bacon crisped and the scallops were just cooked through. This premium appetizer cost about $2 and announced that the party was special enough to justify splurging on luxury ingredients. Hostesses made bacon-wrapped scallops by wrapping each sea scallop in a half strip of bacon, securing with toothpicks, sometimes brushing with melted butter or marinade, then broiling until the bacon was crispy and the scallops were opaque throughout. The scallops had to be fresh or properly thawed if frozen. Old scallops had fishy smell that bacon couldn't mask. The bacon had to be thin cut or it wouldn't cook through before the scallops overcook and became rubbery. The timing was critical. Scallops cooked quickly, and overcooked scallops were tough and unpleasant, announcing that the cook didn't understand proper seafood cooking. The scallops were served immediately from the broiler while still hot, creating appetizer that required last-minute cooking, but that impressed guests with its restaurant-quality results. The combination of sweet, tender scallop and salty, crispy bacon created flavor and texture contrast that made the appetizer memorable. Bacon-wrapped scallops appeared at the most formal and expensive holiday parties where demonstrating wealth and sophistication mattered, where fresh seafood was available and affordable, and where guests appreciated premium ingredients properly prepared. The scallops announced that this party was important enough to justify expensive ingredients and that the hostess understood how to handle luxury seafood. The appetizer taught that the most expensive ingredients required the most careful cooking, that scallops were unforgiving, and that the narrow window between perfectly cooked and rubbery required attention and experience. The high stakes of cooking expensive ingredients separated confident cooks from nervous ones and demonstrated that entertaining excellence sometimes meant risking expensive failures in pursuit of impressive success. Oysters. Rockefeller brought New Orleans sophistication to home parties through oysters topped with spinach herb mixture and baked. This impressive creation cost about $2 and demonstrated that hostesses could recreate famous restaurant dishes at home. Hostesses made Oysters Rockefeller by shucking fresh oysters and leaving them on the half shell, preparing topping from cooked spinach, butter, breadcrumbs, herbs, and sometimes pernod or anise extract, spooning the mixture over each oyster and baking until the topping was golden and the oysters were just cooked through. The oyster shucking required skill and proper tools, an oyster knife and understanding of how to open the shells without cutting yourself or spilling the precious oyster liquor inside. Many hostesses had their fishmonger shuck the oysters, accepting the higher cost in exchange for avoiding the dangerous and difficult shucking process. The topping had to be flavorful enough to complement the oysters without without overwhelming their delicate briny taste. The spinach had to be cooked and squeezed completely dry, or it made the topping watery and the oysters soggy. Oysters Rockefeller appeared at the most formal and expensive holiday parties, where recreating famous restaurant dishes demonstrated culinary ambition and sophistication. The dish's name, honoring John D. Rockefeller because it was so rich, added to its prestige and announced that this was luxury appetizer worthy of the wealthiest guests. The appetizer taught that restaurant dishes could be recreated at home with proper technique and quality ingredients, that oysters were luxury ingredient that required careful handling, and that the most impressive entertaining often involved bringing restaurant experiences into home settings, demonstrating that home hostesses could rival professional chefs when they possessed the skills and were willing to invest the effort. Beef. Wellington Bites completed the collection by demonstrating the absolute peak of 1950s appetizer ambition, individual portions of beef tenderloin wrapped in pate and puff pastry, requiring multiple advanced techniques in single appetizer. Beef Wellington Bites brought French haute cuisine to American parties through beef tenderloin cut into small cubes, seared, spread with liver pate, wrapped in puff pastry, and baked until the pastry was golden and flaky. This elaborate creation cost about $3 and produced about 24 bites that were the most impressive and expensive appetizers possible in home entertaining. Hostesses made beef Wellington bites by cutting beef tenderloin into 1-inch cubes, searing them quickly on all sides to brown the exterior while leaving the interior rare, cooling completely, spreading each cube with liver pate, wrapping in squares of puff pastry, sealing the edges, brushing with beaten egg, and baking at high temperature until the pastry was golden and puffed. The beef had to be seared properly. Too little browning and it lacked flavor, too much cooking and the beef would be overcooked after the pastry baked. The cooling was essential. Hot beef would melt the pastry and prevent proper wrapping. The puff pastry had to be kept cold while working with it, or it became too soft to handle and wouldn't puff properly during baking. The wrapping had to be neat and sealed completely, or the juices would leak during baking and create soggy bottom instead of crispy pastry. Beef Wellington Bites appeared only at the most formal and expensive cocktail parties where demonstrating culinary mastery mattered more than budget considerations, where guests appreciated fine dining and understood the techniques required to create such elaborate appetizers. The bites represented the absolute peak of home entertaining ambition, showing that 1950s hostesses were willing to attempt dishes that seemed impossibly complicated in pursuit of creating parties that guests would remember and talk about for years. Which of these 50 forgotten holiday appetizers did your grandmother serve at her 1950s parties? Comment the appetizer name and your state. I'm mapping where these entertaining traditions persisted longest and which regions abandoned them first, familiar and adventurous. This understanding of balance and variety disappeared as simpler entertaining eliminated the abundance that characterized 1950s parties. The labor was immense, spending entire days preparing appetizers, stuffing individual items one by one, wrapping bacon around 50 pieces of fruit or seafood, rolling and slicing dozens of pinwheels, making multiple dips and spreads from scratch, baking pastry shells individually, shucking oysters, searing beef cubes. Every appetizer represented time and attention that modern convenience has eliminated. But something valuable was lost when these appetizers vanished from holiday parties. The variety that made parties interesting disappeared as 3 store-bought items replaced 50 homemade ones. The skills that separated accomplished hostesses from beginners were forgotten as buying replaced making. The social hierarchies based on entertaining ability dissolved as everyone served the same purchased appetizers from the same stores. The understanding that parties required days of preparation vanished as last-minute shopping became normal. The make-ahead strategies that allowed complex entertaining disappeared as simpler parties eliminated the need for such planning. The presentation skills that created visual appeal were forgotten as disposable serving dishes replaced silver trays and as arrangement became less important than just having food available. We lost recognition that entertaining was performance art, that hostesses were judged by their parties, that social status depended partly on ability to create impressive spreads, and that the most successful women were often those who could entertain beautifully. These social structures disappeared as entertaining became casual, and as the formality that characterized 1950s parties gave way to relaxed gatherings where effort seemed excessive rather than appropriate. Subscribe for more 1950s entertaining history, preserving the recipes and techniques that defined how previous generations hosted parties. Next video covers 30 holiday drinks from the 1950s that nobody makes anymore. The punches, cocktails, and special beverages that required advanced preparation and created festive drinking beyond just opening bottles. From their parties to yours, don't let them forget what 1950s hostesses knew about entertaining, presentation, and the kind of effort that created parties guests remembered for years. These 50 appetizers deserve remembering not just as recipes, but as evidence of entertaining culture that valued skill, variety, and the belief that parties were worth days of preparation.